Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. I'm going to give you a quick legislative update on what's been going on in the Supreme Court and the House, and then I'm going to go talk about something that I think is just kind of interesting. So what's going on right now is the Supreme Court is hearing a case on Loperbright versus Raimondo. Okay, what this is the Chevron deference case I've been talking about the phishing stuff. And what it has the potential of doing is stopping Chevron deference, which would effectively tie the ATF's hands behind their back and would basically get rid of a lot of the executive power that the ATF uses against us. So Vanderstock v. Garland. So this is still going on. It's not the pistol brace, I'm sorry. I keep getting this confused. It's the frame rule, the ghost gun frame rule. Justice Alito has stayed the case until August 4th, and there's been a development in that 20 states, including the District of Columbia, have come out and filed an amicus brief in support of gun control, in support of Merrick Garland and this unjust anti-2 amendment rule. If you check out the news in the 2A news, something that's been going around, which is kind of eye-opening, I guess to say, is there's a survey that came out, and I'm going to talk about surveys again because I want to talk about Matthew McConaughey too. But this survey came out from Reason Magazine, and it shows that up to 60% of Americans have actually own a firearm. And part of this is with minorities and women in very urban areas, which are historically Democratic voters. And what they found in this survey is that up to 60% of these people, of Americans, own firearms. But more specifically, what they found was that some people were actually lying on the survey about not having firearms. And they cross-referenced some things to get the numbers that they eventually came to, which is about 60%. Now, I think this is very telling because the 2A guys, our community, we've been demonized enough to where we don't actually come out and we're not very forthright about what we own anymore. And we're also probably not going to talk too well or speak too well to pollsters because we see them as kind of the enemy, which is rightfully so. Now, the other thing that's making the 2A rounds, and I've seen it one very pro about Matthew McConaughey coming out and talking about the Second Amendment and how he talked to us, but he did this on a leftist news wing media. So he did it on ABC News with a very leftist commentator. And he was talking about reasonable gun control. And what he actually used was the term responsible gun control. Now, if you've been in this fight as long as I have been in this fight, which is, I've been doing this, podcasting for over a year or two now, and I've been in the fight for the 2A since I've been a gun owner. So way past being 18, when I was younger. I used to get into these discussions with my dad, and I would continue to get into these discussions with other people in schools, and I debated many people about the Second Amendment throughout my life. I've spoken to the Roundhouse in New Mexico 3 times now on behalf of the Second Amendment. And what I've noticed about this is they cited a poll from Fox News. Now, Fox News is kind of coming under fire a lot more now because we're seeing that they're not exactly on the right side. They're not even in the center. They're kind of camouflaged rhino guys that try to pretend that they're on our side. But in that poll, pardon me, I needed to wet my whistle a little bit. So in this poll, Matthew and the commentator mentioned, and I say Matthew McConaughey, mentioned that there is support for gun control, reasonable gun control in their eyes, which is waiting periods, people under the age of 21 not being able to buy firearms, semi-automatic firearms, universal background checks, red flag laws. They said that there was 80% or 87% of the American populace that are actually behind this idea of reasonable gun control. And I disagree wholeheartedly, because if that were the case, if there were that many people, the people in power would have already they would have already come together and already would have passed the reasonable gun control stuff, because it would have had enough popularity that no one would be petitioning against them. And with the rise of FPC, SEF, so FPC, Firearms Policy Coalition, SEF, Second Amendment, or SAF, I think is what they are, Second Amendment Foundation, and GAO, Gun Owners of America, which you should be a member of one of the three, if not two of the three, or all three, especially since they just take donations, and then they send you a packet that lets you know you're a member. They're not like the NRA. They're not going to harass you. They're actually actively always going out and supporting our rights. But with the rise of these organizations, and it lends credence to what I'm about to say, that they're absolutely wrong about what they're thinking. That if you look at that Fox poll, there's 1,000 supposedly random people that answered their phone, either their landline or their cell phone, which tells me that they mentioned the landline. It probably means older boomer FUD dudes that answered and responded that they're in support of this. Now, boomer FUDs are always in support of gun control. They're the ones that are always anti-modern rifle, period. If it's semi-automatic and you're on a gun range and you're putting off rounds, even mag dumping, which you should be able to do, in my opinion, they're the ones that have a problem with that. What's cool about living in northwest New Mexico is I can shoot on BLM land, so I clean up my mess. Most of us try to, but there's some of us that are jackholes that don't. But anyway, I digress. What happens is we don't have those range officers unless you go to certified gun ranges. And usually when we go to certified gun ranges, or I do, it's for a shooting match or it's for a specific purpose like a shooting match. So that's not what you're going to see. With the rise of, after COVID, when we found out that, you're kind of on your own in some cases, in a lot of cases, you need to be able to defend yourself. And that's what we're seeing in these polls. The poll from Reason, that up to 60% of American people have decided to arm themselves because they know that they're their first responder. They're their own first responder. Now, to have 87% of 1,000 people say that, it tells me that number one, I don't see a lot of people that when they find out there's a poll, will stay on the phone line. Most of us are too busy. Most of us have a job. We're not going to sit on the line and talk to someone about all these little tick boxes, especially when we don't know who the hell they are. Okay, so that's number one. So I think they're citing only 1,000 people of over 330 million Americans. If you think about that in terms of what Reason said, that's not correct. What I mean is that if there's 60% of... that can't be right either. Sorry, I was trying to do the math in my head and I got the wrong answer. If there's 60% of 330, that's 198 million people that own firearms in the United States. That's not counting the people that own multiple firearms. If that's the reality, then 1,000 people is a very small sampling. So I disagree with Matthew McConaughey, and I think he's being disingenuous, and I think he's using a lot of buzzwords like responsibility, which most people in the 2A believe firmly that we should be responsible about everything we do. But using those buzzwords and not coming at us exactly like trying to treat us like bad dudes immediately, that's a good thing. But when you come to us and you're being disingenuous when you're using a poll that only 1,000 people, now 1,000 random people, I'm guessing they called a lot of people in cities, And if they called more rural Americans, I think that they would find, number one, we wouldn't answer the phone. Number two, we wouldn't stay on the phone to take a poll. And I think that would be more reflective of the real number. So I think it's disingenuous to say that Americans are they're anti-Second Amendment, or they're for these so-called reasonable gun restrictions. Now, to the fun stuff. If you've looked at Smith & Wesson, Smith & Wesson now has a foldable carbine, and so does Kel-Tec. And Kel-Tec's folds end over end, and Smith & Wesson's folds to the side so you can actually use optics. Now, having shot both of them now, having handled both of them now, I can honestly tell you, I think this is the most stupid-ass idea I've ever seen. The ergonomics on both of these guns is solid crap. For a gun made from Smith & Wesson, even though I'm okay with polymer guns or polymer being used in firearms, these both feel like Kel-Tec crap. One of them is Kel-Tec, honestly. So if you've ever handled a Kel-Tec, now I've had one before, and it was pretty reliable. I can honestly say it was one of the better handguns I had when I was poorer. But what I noticed about Kel-Tec is that they must use like plastic recovered from the beach after they snorted 1,000 lines of coke, or a couple lines of coke anyway. Anyway, the gun is designed for like Planet of the Apes type stuff. And I felt the same way when I handled and shot the Smith & Wesson. And what I noticed is that they're really... both were reliable. I had no problems with reliability with either one of these guns. But what I noticed is that they're horrible just about in every way. Now, I know for a foldable gun or a survival gun, that's what these basically are, that they're in a niche. And that niche is to be compact and be able to put them away in some sort of bag to carry around. I'd rather take the 2 pins out of an AR or put it in a bag than do that, because when I reassembled my AR, at least I'd have a usable gun that would actually have the ergonomics, have the accuracy, have the compatibility I would want, even in like a 9mm AR, versus these guns. I can say they're absolute garbage. If you want one, great. I'm guessing you want one because you think the folding idea is cool. There are folding ARs now that, okay, I don't understand the part of folding that is necessary. A truck gun, I understand to some degree, but if you have a truck gun, you more than likely can use a full-size gun or even a pistol that you would convert or be able to put the 2 pins in and make it into a regular one. Yes, you have to do that under stress. Yes, that's a big deal. I understand that. But the usability and the accuracy and the sheer fact that you have compatibility issues. Now, both examples can either use, the Smith & Wesson can only use Smith & Wesson mags. The Kel-Tec can use Glock or Beretta or SIG nowadays. My problem with this is that if you have a part break on one of these guns, the gun's basically useless, especially if it's some central part, because you're not going to be able to find a receiver unless you get it from the factory again. Now, they may have warranties for these. I didn't look at that. I really don't care. But I see more and more people going after this kind of gimmicky thing because it's new. And I understand the newness of something and wanting to get it. And maybe that'll make it a collector's item later on. But as far as usability, I understand pistol caliber carbines. I understand that a hell of a lot more than I ever would have if it weren't for one of my friends who I've mentioned on here before, who got me to shoot a couple of them. And I realized that actually made me buy my MP5, because eventually I'm going to make my MP5 from a pistol into a Form 1 item, and I'll make it a rifle. Now, what I notice about the pistol caliber carbines, the foldable ones, is that they're On the Smith & Wesson, I don't remember seeing sights on it. It had plenty of rail space and Picatinny to put an optic on it. On the Kel-Tec, it had these flip-up foldable sights. One of them was fixed on the front, but the rear sight was foldable, and it was just a piece of plastic. Now, under stress, duress, what happens if this breaks? On the Kel-Tec, putting an optic on is probably not meaning that you're not going to fold the gun, period. If you're not going to fold it, what's the point of having it? Because at that point, you're at the same size as a regular carbine. And I'd rather have even a pistol caliber carbine in its full guise than to have something that didn't have optics. And again, this is me getting older and realizing that my eyesight is not as great as it once was. I can use irons. I like irons. And I still consider it a point of honor to be able to use irons to show that you're still capable of using them, because it's the fundamentals of marksmanship. But as you get older, optics are a thing. Optics are modern. Optics enhance your capability. Either they give you visual clarity or they allow you to acquire a target faster. And in 2023, it doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense if you're going to have any kind of carbine that you don't have optics on your gun. Okay? So when I look at these guns, these gimmicky guns, it's great that they fold. I understand that. But unless I'm on a plane in Alaska where I need a survival rifle if a plane goes down, I see very little use for one of these foldable carbines. And the reason why I don't see a use case for it is if I was going to bug out and have to backpack a gun with me, I'm not going to collapse a gun, throw it in a backpack, carry that said gun in addition to the gun I have on me. And in which case I'd have a full-size carbine. In my case, it'd probably be a battle rifle, and it would be a sidearm. I see very little use case for something like this unless you just want it because it's cool. And if you think it's cool, more power to you. I'm giving you my opinion on it, having handled both of them. The charging of both weapons is cumbersome. The accuracy was okay. I mean, I can see that they're fairly accurate for a pistol caliber carbine. The reliability, again, no problems with that. Where I have a problem with it is more so serviceability. If you look at an AR, pistol caliber AR, if a part breaks on it, you can find a part for it. You have a part for it. If you break something on one of these plastic wonders, you're screwed. It's not going to hold up if you JB weld it, or if you had it reprinted, maybe that might be something. But I'm pretty sure neither one of these firearms has more than a year warranty on them. So what happens in the longevity of using this gun? I'm a big fan of keeping it simple, and the serviceability of a firearm is something that is very much on my radar. Okay, so when I talk about the Kalashnikov, I have firearms, firing pins, extractors, extractor springs, recoil springs. I have pins, extra pins for if I lose one of those. And in the AR world, I have the same type of stuff with with additional pieces like gas rings, bolt faces, bolt heads, the whole thing. The reason why I do that is because I like to keep my weapons in action without having to ship them back to the manufacturer every time something goes wrong. And that's why I've always aired on the side of things like the Kalashnikov or the AR-15 or like the G3 style rifles, the roller delayed rifles, because I can service them myself. I can headspace them myself. I can check headspace. I can replace the wear parts as needed, and that goes a long way with me. And with these newer plastic wonders, I understand the coolness factor, I guess, for some people, but I don't see the usability or the longevity that you would need for something like this, especially if it's going to be your primary gun for any length of time. If it's to get you to the gun that's going to get you home, great. If it's going to get you home, great. All the power in the world to you guys. But when I look at them, I see nothing of redemption for them other than they can collapse. And I think that an AR popping 2 pins and collapsing it into a smaller platform to where you can put it in a bag, you could do that with an AR-10 even, or an AR-15, the AR pistol. Any of those you could do and still end up with a more serviceable firearm than you would with one of these. So that's just my 2 cents on this. The other thing I've noticed is that Kel-Tec, while they keep putting out newer and innovative ideas, they have a 5.7 pistol. It looks like something out of Star Wars. If you think about that, though, to have to open up the pistol to change the magazine, and when I say that, it hinges at the top with a lower, to go ahead and do that, how serviceable or how usable is this gun? There's no place to put a brace if they ever allow you to have braces again. It's not long enough to use it for a stock or to form one and make it into a short-barreled rifle. There's no facility to put a stock on it at all. So what's the point of the gun? In addition, the 5.7, while it's the new hotness, everybody's into it. I was thinking I was going to be into it for a while until I saw the ballistics and saw it's really not much better than a 22 mag. That's when I lost all interest in the gun, in the 5.7 caliber, because I'd rather have a 9mm that I could do more with and could share ammunition between a rifle or a carbine and my sidearm. That makes sense to me. Or I'd rather have a regular full-sized rifle, AR-15. So these are my thoughts. These are the updates I wanted to give you. Crackheads are going to crackhead, I guess, is what I should call this, because whether it's the leftist loons that are trying to come after your firearms or the crackhead designers coming up with weird-ass ideas to try to sell firearms, crackheads are going to crackhead. Like, share, subscribe, be great.
I can't let it slide. My politics are rather controversial. Who would have thought that I ain't catching all slack and I have enemies on my